Welcome to Binge Breakthrough, the podcast designed to help you finally break through the barriers that keep you stuck, feeling out of control around food. I'm Master Certified Coach Jane Pilger, and I want you to know that no matter how long you've been struggling or what you've tried, food freedom is possible, and I'm here to show you how. After years of therapy, eating disorders treatment, restrictive diets, and reading all the books, I was still stuck in the on-again, off-again cycle of restricting and binging until I was able to see it all from a new perspective that changed everything. Each week, I will share the strategies, tools, and mindset that allowed me to overcome my decades-long battle with binge eating. Your journey to body trust starts now. Let's dive in. Hello, trusted listener. Welcome to Binge Breakthrough. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you are listening to this podcast for a reason. I trust that you're going to hear something today that is insightful and impactful on your journey with food. So if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that we've been kind of doing a little bit of a celebration of the 100th podcast episode earlier this month. And in this month of October 2024, we are continuing the celebration with kind of a top 10 theme for October. So some of the blog posts over on Substack, as well as the podcast episodes, have a little bit of this top 10 theme. And we're going to continue with this week's podcast. And what we're talking about today is the top 10 takeaways from previous and current clients. These takeaways are showcasing real experiences, real life transformations. And I wanted to share these today on the podcast, not as a commercial for myself, but as an idea, as a possibility for you of what can be possible for you. So I invite you to listen to this podcast episode to really think about, can you see yourself in any of these stories? If not, could you possibly see yourself in any of these stories? What can you take away from these takeaways? These takeaways are here for you to learn from, to give you some insight, to give you some motivation, to give you some inspiration on your journey with food. So as you listen to these takeaways, just see what resonates with you. What I find is when there's a particular area that, for me, if I'm working on anything, when I'm working on something, maybe a particular area, I start to hear and read and see certain messages in a lot of places. And that may be what you find today. As you listen, you may hear something that you need to hear today. You may hear something that you think, that's it. That's maybe my next area, my next level of work. So take this in and see what you can take away. These are the takeaways that my clients have shared. And now my invitation for you is, what can you take away from the takeaways? All right, so let's dive in. I'm going to give you each one. We're going to go 1 through 10. These are in no particular order. And then at the end, I will go ahead and repeat 1 through 10, the takeaways, without any of the side stories, so that you can hear them all again at the end, in one nice summary. All right. So let's start with number 1. It's not about the food. And this is number 1 for a reason, because it really isn't. Ending binge eating, developing a peaceful relationship with food, it is not about the food. And this is really where most of us get it wrong. We spend so much time focusing on the food. What should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? How much should I eat? When should I eat? We're so focused on the food that we're not focused on what's really happening underneath the hood. Yes, there are some ways in that food is important. Well, it's not, there are some ways in that food is important, but for the most part, it really isn't about the food. Food isn't the problem. Food is the symptom. So this is the takeaway from my client, Kate. And she says, it's not about the food. It's not about the size of my jeans. It's about connecting with the part of myself, the internal parts, those parts that want to eat. It's that internal connection. It's not the external food. It's not the size of the jeans. So that's takeaway number 1. It's not about the food. Takeaway number 2, the power of nervous system regulation. I love talking about the nervous system, and really, I would say this was the missing piece for me. Learning about my nervous system, learning how to regulate my nervous system with something other than food. And this takeaway came from my client, Andrea. She says, my biggest takeaway is the importance of paying attention to and honoring the needs of my nervous system. Before we started working together, she really knew nothing about her nervous system. She didn't really even, maybe she knew she had a nervous system, but she certainly didn't know the various states. She didn't know how to recognize what was going on. She just thought she was broken. She didn't understand why she did what she did with food. She would get really upset with herself. She would, again, try to focus on the food and only eat certain things and not eat certain things. But what she wasn't really realizing is what was happening with her nervous system regulation. So that was a big takeaway for her. All right, takeaway number 3, building mind-body trust. So what is mind-body trust? It's pretty much what it sounds like. It's trust. It's developing trust between your mind and your body. It's rebuilding the trust that between your body and your mind. It's like I talk about like two-way trust. Two-way trust really is kind of like your body trusting that you are going to listen to it and you agreeing that you are going to listen to your body. So the trust goes both ways. The listening goes both ways. We can't separate our mind from our body. We try so often. We try to separate. Okay, this is just what I'm thinking. If I can just change my thoughts, change what's happening in my mind, then I'll be able to do whatever I want. My body will respond. But we can't separate the mind and the body. They really are interconnected. And so in this case, we're looking at this trust between the mind and the body because they do work together. So Lauren says, you taught me the first step is to remove restrictions. The first step, it's not to stop the binging, but it's to rebuild that trust between the mind and the body. It's that trust that the body's going to communicate with you. The body's going to tell you when it's hungry. The body's going to tell you when it has had enough. So the body tells us, and then we listen to the signals of our body. It takes time for this trust to develop, but it is a huge component and a huge takeaway of really cultivating that connection with your body. All right, takeaway number 4, you are not broken. You have probably heard, if you've been listening to me for a while, you've heard me say this before. So many people who struggle with binge eating, who struggle with feeling out of control around food, feel broken. But this is not the case. You are not broken. And this was one of Kelly's top takeaways. She says, I'm not broken and you're not broken. And the sentence, how does this make sense? These are 2 simple yet powerful statements that I heard from you early on, is what she said. So these 2 statements, you're not broken, and how does this make sense? These are both statements that I say a lot. And if you are constantly thinking that you're broken, you're probably not saying the second sentence. You're probably not saying, how does this make sense? Because if you think you're broken, that's how you're making sense of it. It makes sense because I'm broken. It makes sense because I can't control myself. It makes sense because I'll never be able to figure this out. But if you can put both of these sentences together, I am not broken and I can figure this out. I can figure out how this makes sense. And when I can do that, I'm getting under the hood. I'm looking to see what's going on. All right, number 5 also came from Kelly, permission and self-compassion. She says, you gave me permission permission to give myself grace if I binge, permission to allow myself to eat the foods that I enjoy, and permission to appreciate the body that I have now. Not the body that I would love to have, not the body that I have always wished that I had, but the body that I have now. The power of permission is huge. It is very powerful. That's why I call it the power of permission. There are so many different ways that we can use permission. And that permission, if you do give yourself grace, if you binge, that brings in that self-compassion. And it looks like asking that previous question, how does this make sense? Permission, so important. All right, takeaway number 6, holding multiple feelings. This one is so powerful, especially people who struggle with food, particularly feeling out of control around food, feeling, the binge eating. A lot of times there is black and white thinking underneath the binge. So it's all or nothing. It's black and white. There's it's either or. But there is so much that happens when we can bring in some gray, when we can bring in the and. So this comes in with emotions, holding multiple feelings. So Denise says, you have taught me to hold more than one feeling. She says fear and also joy. She went on to share this amazing story. She recently went on vacation and she came back and she said, I just want to let you know, you are changing my life, and you are changing my life in areas beyond food. So she tells me that she went on this overseas flight and she was able to very comfortably find a seat that she wanted. She was able to find joy on the plane, to have a good time, to find some in-flight entertainment. And she said at one point she looked over and her husband was just looking at her like, who are you? And she went on to tell me how in the past she has had so much fear on an airplane, that her entire time being on an airplane would be filled with fear and anxiety, that she could not enjoy herself on a plane. She was in the either or. And since she had so much fear, that is all she could experience. But because she has learned the skill of holding multiple feelings, she was able to, yes, she still had some fear on that airplane, and she also found joy. And her husband was like, who are you? So she went on to say, you have helped me find some safety even on a plane. And as I look through the rest of this list, I realize safety is not on here as a top 10 takeaway, but I'm going to put it in as 6.5, finding safety. She was able to find fear and joy on the plane. Yes, because she has cultivated the skill of holding multiple emotions at once. And she has also cultivated the skill of creating safety for herself, even on a plane. So powerful. Sometimes some of my favorite stories, I love the stories around food. I really do. And some of my favorite stories are when clients come in and they share experiences about how the work that we've done either inside Cultivate or inside a private one-on-one, our one-on-one coaching container, how something in their life has happened that has nothing to do with food, but completely has come from the skills and what they've learned and what they're applying from our work together. And this story about the plane was a great example of that. Okay, let's move on to number 7, understanding the root causes. So remember at the beginning of this podcast episode, I said food is a symptom. Food is not the problem. It's a symptom. And so Carol's big takeaway in all of our work together has been really getting to the root reason, the root cause. So she says the top thing for me, the top takeaway for me is getting to the reason I binge, getting to that reason needs to be addressed. It's not just learning how not to binge. Because if we don't take care of the root cause, we're not going to address the binging. If we just focus on trying not to binge, we're not actually addressing what's happening at the root. So this is so important. And what's so powerful about Carol is she is doing incredible work to get to her root cause. She has quite a few. There's quite a bit going on there. And the work that she is doing to get to her root cause, to work with it, is powerful. And we're able to see these incredible examples of the way that she is able to use this work as she addresses her root cause. And guess what? As you address the root cause, the behavior, the symptom, the binging, it falls away. It doesn't just go away overnight, but it happens gradually as we address the real issue and the real problems. All right, takeaway number 8, the importance of connection. And connection, there's a previous podcast episode that I did where I talked about connection is the closest thing to a magic pill you will ever find to end binge eating. It truly is all about connection. So this client is Emma, and her biggest takeaway, she said connection with myself, connection with my hunger signals, connection with my emotions, and connection with others. Inside Cultivate, with friends, with family. Connection has been her biggest takeaway. And so many times we use food to disconnect. So if we can bring in the power of connection and we can connect with ourself, with our signals from our body, with our emotions, with other people, with people who get it, people who understand, with our friends, people who love us. That connection is so powerful. And it's that connection that creates nervous system regulation. It creates safety. Those other two things that are so important in this entire journey. All right. Number 9, inner work and the impact on family. So this is from Erin. And Erin said her takeaway, learning about the inner work and how it shows up during binges has been key, especially when I can share that learning with my husband. So what does this mean? The inner work. It really means getting aware of what's happening inside me when I want to binge. What is that dialogue? What are the physical sensations? What is going on inside? Again, it's not the food. It's not about the food. If I'm only focusing on don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, I'm not even getting to the inner work. So for her, it's learning about the inner work, learning how to connect with myself. And what's been really powerful with Erin is that she's not doing this work with her husband, but her husband is on this journey with her. And what's been amazing, she shares what she's learning with our work together with him. And so not only is he then aware of, oh, okay, I know what you're working on. I know what this is. He might ask her, how can I support you? What are ways that I can help? And there are other items that we have talked about inside Cultivate and inside our coaching container that have been initially, yes, around the discussion around food, but she and her husband are able to bring these items into their own relationship, into their relationship with their daughter. This work is not just about what happens when you sit down to eat or when you stand up to eat. It's what happens in your everyday life, and it impacts every aspect of your life. All right, now we're on to number 10, healing through sharing. This one came from my client, Marielle, and she said, I was talking to her about like, what is her, what has been your biggest takeaway, from our time together? And she was just like, wow, I don't even know. Everything that we have done together has just been so incredible and so life-changing. But she then reflected and she said, you know what? The biggest turning point for me was when I encouraged her to share her story. Marielle had some abuse in her childhood that she had not told anybody about other than me. And I had encouraged her to talk to her husband about it. She has a very safe and secure relationship with her husband. And she decided to tell him. And she actually told him it was a drive. She was driving home to see her family, to her childhood home, and a lot was coming up for her, which makes a lot of sense. She was like, you know what? I think it's time. And she told her husband, and he met her with just so much love and so much compassion. And she said, for me, it was such a big turning point. It was like something clicked into place. I had the biggest shift around food because I felt like a weight was lifted. I was no longer carrying this burden. Now, I don't say this to just suggest that anybody go out and talk about their abuse to anybody if that is something that you have not done before. Safety in this area is very, very important, and that can only be done, created with time. And it's something that Marielle and I have been able to create together. And through that creation of safety, she was able to really step into the safety she knew she already had with her husband. But healing through sharing, it doesn't have to be about something big like abuse. It can be sharing your own struggles with food. Now, again, it is going to be making sure that if you share, it's going to be with somebody that you feel safe with. That's safety. Remember, that safety component is very important. All right. I hope you have heard something in these takeaways. I'm going to summarize them for you again, but I hope that you've heard something here for you that makes you think, ooh, that's it. That's where I want to go. That's what I want to work on. That's maybe this is my next level of work. Maybe if there's something here in these takeaways where you're like, oh, okay. If I'm struggling with food, if you are struggling with food right now, and one of these 10 takeaways that I'm about to repeat to you, if one of these is like, oh, yes, maybe that's missing, you now have guidance on where to go next, which is amazing. That's all we need. What's my very next step? We don't have to worry about like where we're going to be lots and lots of, years or months into the future. What is my very next step? So I'm going to repeat these 10 takeaways for you. And I want you to identify one of these takeaways as your next step. And then you can just decide, what is my next step? Maybe your next step is reaching out to me. I want some of this. I would love to talk to you more about it. Maybe your next step is something else. You decide, you check in with yourself. What is your next step? So I'm going to give you these 10 takeaways. All right. Number 1, it's not about the food. Number 2, the power of nervous system regulation. Number 3, building mind-body trust. Number 4, you are not broken. Number 5, permission and self-compassion. Number 6, holding multiple feelings. I added a 6.5, creating safety. Number 7, understanding the root causes. Number 8, the importance of connection. Number 9, inner work and family impact. And number 10, healing through sharing. I hope this was helpful today. I want you to know, recovering from binge eating, feeling in control around food. I don't even like to think about it as in control. I like to think about it as peaceful, as calm, connected, and confident around food is possible. No matter how long it has been, no matter how long you have been struggling, you can become a peaceful eater. Now, if you would like support from me, please reach out. If you happen to be listening to this live when it airs in October of 2024, I have just released a special limited time offer for support through this holiday season. It's an incredible offer for tailored support that is designed to be quick, to be short, to not take up much of your time during this holiday season, but to also help you through this most challenging time of year. I will put a link to that in the show notes if you want to check it out. Otherwise, think about these 10 takeaways. Where is your next level of work? Take the very next step. You can become a peaceful eater. All right, I'll see you next week.
If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you will want to be sure to follow me on Substack. There, you'll find additional articles, discussion, and a library of all of the podcast episodes to help you on your journey with food. You can also access deep dive workshops and get behind the scenes audio and video that will help you understand and overcome your food struggles. Find me under The Peaceful Eater at janepilger.substack.com. I'll see you there.